Hi, it's Gina from C9D Designs. This is my audition for Graphic 45 Brand Ambassador 2023. I'm kind of making my project up as I go. It's just an idea I had. I'm going to be using Voyage Beneath the Sea Steampunk Set 1 and 2 stamps. They're really a neat set. It's the 12 by 12 paper collection from Graphic 45, Wild and Free. I'm planning on using these 3 colors. From Graphic 45's staple collections, I'm going to be using the large tag. And I'm going to be using some Graphic 45 medium weight chipboard. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is grab that large tag and cut 2 pieces from the chipboard. So I'm going to set one of my chipboards aside. I'm going to grab my chipboard cutter and I'm going to cut the very top off. Alright, I cut the very top off. Now I'm going to trim it at 3 7/8. And then I'm going to trim it at 1 inch. So I have 3 7/8 and 1 inch. I'm going to grab my other piece of chipboard to trim it at 3 7/8. I'm going to set that piece aside. Then I'm going to turn it and I'm going to trim it at 1 3/4. So I'll have that. I'm going to set that piece aside. So I have 1 3/4 and I have 3 7/8. Those are my scraps. So that's what I'm thinking. Next I'm gonna cut 2 pieces of Kraft colored cardstock. I think I'm going to take this piece, put some glue on it. I'll line it up and glue them together. I'm going to burnish it down. Then I'm going to grab my 1 inch strip. Make sure it's lined up with the paper at the top and bottom over where I connected the 2 papers. Then I'm going to turn it over and burnish that down. So that's my 1 inch piece. So I'm going to leave about 1/8 inch gap between the chipboards. I think I'm going to cut it down to about there. My glue. I'm going to leave that 1/8 inch gap, and I'm going to line it up on the top and bottom. I'm going to burnish it down. So now we have 2 pieces of chipboard on. We're going to grab our other 3 7/8 inch. And when we glue it on, we're going to leave a little 1/8 inch. So you want to make sure it's even at the top and bottom. And you're going to burnish it down. Oops. So now we have 3 pieces of chipboard. And then you're going to leave another 1/8 inch gusset. But I'm going to trim the paper down a little. Add glue. Lining it up. Turn it over and burnish. So on each end, you have a little bit of chipboard showing. Okay, now I'm just folding. Okay, that's going to be our base. Yeah, I'm going to grab one of my scraps of cardstock. And I'm going to see about how big I want it. For each side. Grab my paper trimmer. Grab my glue. I'm going to line it up with the top and bottom. I'm going to burnish it down. I'm going to score where they meet. On both, score on each side. I like to make sure that mine are secure. Yeah, I'm gonna grab my other piece. Find the crease. Just scoring down it, giving it a nice bend. Now I'm going to grab my large die, and I think my cover is going to be blue. Alright, so I've cut my chipboard. I accidentally ripped my top, but that's alright. On the front of my project, I know I'm going to want to cut it down to 3 3/4. So that's going to be my cover. From the same piece that you cut the 3 3/4 off, cut 1 inch. Maybe just shy of 1 inch. Alright, that's going to be on my spine. So I'll set these two up here. Now on my back, I'm going to grab the other piece. I'm just going to trim off the top where I messed it up. Then I'm going to trim it to 3 3/4. So that should be the back. So now we have this piece. Okay, so now you want to cut the end at 1 5/8. So I have another top and a piece of the cardstock. I'm going to grab my scoreboard. I'm going to line this top up so I can score right where the curve meets the top. And I'm scoring just at the very top where it curves up. So it looks like that. Now I'm going to grab my paper trimmer. And I'm going to cut just the very curved top off. Make sure it fits. All right, fits good. So this piece, set all these aside. This piece I'm going to glue right even with the curves to the very edge where we scored at. Okay, so the part we scored is going to go to the very top edge. Match your curves up. Then I'm just going to burnish that down. Okay, so now for the inside. Okay, I'm going to take my top cover pieces. Grab a piece of scrap here. Have our little I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to get some white cardstock and my large die. I'm going to cut 6 of these, and I'm going to set them aside. So now I'm going to cut the inside. I'm going to use green. I think I'm going to put little pockets in it. So I'm going to cut 2 strips at 1.5 inch long. Okay, so I have 2 strips of my pattern paper at 1.5 inch wide. I'm going to cut it down to 7.5, both pieces. So now I have 2 strips that look like that. I'm going to cut 2 of the blue and 2 of the green. So I will have 6 pieces that are, each one is 7.5 by 1.5. I'm going to grab my scoreboard. I'm going to score these at 3 3/4. All right, those are all scored. I'm going to set these aside. Okay, I got my pattern paper cut. From the bottom of the first green one, I'm going to cut it at 3 7/8. So 3 7/8. Then off of that same one, I'm going to cut it at 1 inch. All right, so we're getting our inside pages. Now we're going to grab the other pattern paper. We're going to trim the bottom off to get rid of the curves. Okay, now we're going to trim it at 3 7/8. On our tag part we have left, we're going to trim it down to 1 5/8. So that's going to be our top part here. All right, so I'm going to grab a piece of scrap inside. Okay, we're going to grab our 7.5 by 1.5 pieces of pattern paper that we scored at 3 3/4. We should have 6 of them. We're going to fold them, get a good crease. I'm going to do this to all of them. So now we have 6 folded in half. Now we're going to grab a piece of Kraft colored cardstock. We're going to trim it at 1.5. And I know my paper is already 8.5 inches long. So 1.5 by 8.5. Now we're going to grab our scoreboard. Okay, I'm going to score at 7.5, 7, 6.5, 6 3/8, 5 7/8, 5 3/8, 5 1/4, 4 3/4, 4 1/4, 4 1/8, 3 5/8, 3 1/8, 3, 2.5, 2, 1 7/8, 1 3/8, and then at 7/8. Now I'm going to fold all my hinges and burnish them really good. Okay, so you're going to bend the first line, you're going to bend it up, then you're going to bend the next one up, then you're going to bend the next one up, then you're going to turn it around, you're going to bend that one in, you want to burnish it, you want to just keep doing that until your hinge has little alleys in between each one. So it'll look something like that. So you're going to turn it over. You're going to grab your score tape. And you're going to, so as you can see, I put little marks. You're going to skip the little alley, but you're going to do each of the 1/2 inch ones. And if you don't have score tape, you can use glue. I usually just burnish mine down. Make sure I'm getting a good hold. Grab some glue. Put just a little glue on. And fold it. Burnish it down. We're going to take the score tape off of the next 2 sections. Put a little glue on. Going to fold those. Going to burnish it. So see, I'm keeping the creases in my little alley. I'm going to continue doing that all the way down. I'll be burnishing as I go. These are all my little alleys. I'm just turning it like you'd turn the pages and burnishing it. Alright, so that's our hinge. Now I'm going to come in, I'm just going to slightly miter the corners on each one, just very slightly. Kind of like that to each one. Okay, so now we have our hinge. We're going to turn our hinge over and grab our score tape. We're going to cover the hinge. I'm leaving little gaps because I like to also use glue. So we're going to burnish these down. We're going to peel off the backing. And I like to turn my little hinges the other way. And I grab a little bit more of my score tape. I just put a little extra on the spine. Okay, I'm going to stick this down on this for now until I'm ready for it. Okay, now that we have our hinge done, I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to grab some ink. And I'm going to heavily ink around all the edges, both sides. Okay, once I have this all inked, I'm going to put it aside. And I'm going to grab our inside pages, the spine part. And I'm going to ink around all of it. Okay, now I'm going to set this aside with my hinge. I'm going to grab my scoreboard and a piece of my paper. I'm going to score in a 1/2 inch. Then I grab my paper trimmer and I'm going to cut my paper at 1 inch. Now I have a scored piece of paper. I'm going to fold it in half along the score line. I'm going to grab my paper trimmer. I'm going to trim these at 1 3/8. I'm going to need 6 of them. Okay, now I have 6 of them. I'm going to take one. I'm just going to miter the corners on each one. Okay, so now I have 6 of them. I'm going to grab my 7.5 by 1.5 strips of paper that we scored at 3 3/4. And I grab my glue. Okay, I have my hinge. I'm going to put glue on the back side. And I'm going to take my strip. And I'm going to glue so the scored parts at this side of my paper. So there's one. I'm going to do the same thing on all 6 of them. Lining up the scored with the edge. So now all 6 of mine have a little hinge here, which I'm going to leave folded in. I'm going to grab my ink and ink around each piece, both sides. Okay, now we're going to grab our base in that middle section that we inked. I'm going to apply glue to the back. I'm going to center it on my 1-inch section. Knowing that the top and bottom will be flush with the edge. Burnish it down. Going to grab my hinge. Going to apply some glue to my hinge. I'm going to put my hinge towards the bottom, leaving about an 1/8 inch gap from the edge. Burnish it down real good. Score on the indentions where the book's gonna fold at. Now do this side. Score where the crease is. Burnish it down. And I like to burnish down in between in all my alleys, just to get a really good hold. And I'll usually turn my pages both ways and burnish. that's what we should have so far. Your book should still close. You could see our hinges for our pages. So now I'm going to take these pockets. I'm just going to separate the colors. I'm going to start with the peach. So it looks like this, and the hinge is opening up. I'm going to close the hinge. And I'm going to apply glue on the hinge flap. Then I'm just going to apply a really thin strip of glue right on the bottom. I'm going to go to my first hinge. I'm going to tuck the flap down there, making sure my page is not sticking over the bottom of my book. I'm going to leave it about 1/8 from the base. So it should look like that. You should still have glue there. So now I'm going to put a little glue on the very edge of that hinge. And just a little here. So it should look like that. I'm gonna fold my page, making sure it's lined up. Then I'm gonna fold it down. And I'm gonna burnish. I'm gonna grab a blue one. Put glue on my hinge. Here's my hinge. I'm going to bend it this way so that my paper, the hinge on my paper will glue to it. I'm going to make sure your pages are lined up. You want to stay about 1/8 inch from the base. So now I'm going to put a little glue at the top. I'm going to bend this hinge that we just glued to back and put a little bit on this edge. Then I'm going to put just a little bit on the bottom. And I'm going to push the hinge in, line my paper up, and adhere it down. Making sure my pages are straight and lining up. Then I'm going to burnish. So now we have 2 pockets. I'm going to grab a green. Put some glue on my hinge. Going to grab my book hinge. I'm going to bend it forward against the blue. I'm going to keep my paper even and glue it on about 1/8 inch from the base. So I'm going to bend it back. glue on the hinge edge. Put a little glue on the top of my paper. And put a little glue at the bottom. And I'm going to evenly push my paper down together. And I'm going to burnish it. So now we have 3 little pockets. So I'm going to grab my peach again, and I'm just going to continue doing the same thing on the last 3 pages. And then I usually burnish them back the other way. So that's what we have so far. Our book pages in. So now we're going to grab our inside pages. We're going to grab some ink. We're going to ink around all the edges. Okay, so now we have all 4 of the inside pages ready to glue in. I'm going to take my curved edge paper, grab my glue. Actually, I think I'm going to take that little section first. Put some glue on. Burnish it down. Grab my next piece. Apply glue. I'm going to burnish it down. So far, that's what I have. I'll grab my next piece. Burnish it down. Now my last piece. Apply glue. Burnish it down. So that's what we have so far.